Hello and welcome to FS Brew. FS Brew is the region's first podcast focusing on all things insurance and insurtech here in the UAE and the wider Middle East. I'm Vidya. I'm the founder of Forward, a startup that works with insurance companies to accelerate their go-to-market propositions and digital marketing and transformation initiatives.
Hi, I'm Ranjit Philip. I consult with startups and corporates in the new venture development stage, mostly in the 0 to 1 stage, help them with strategy, business model development, and go to market. In this episode, we are speaking with Ahmed Elgabri, investment professional from Shorooq Partners, who has been within the insurance investment space, I'd say, working out of Egypt. And Shorooq Partners is a leading technology investor in the Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan region with offices across 6 cities. So it was a fairly interesting discussion, Vidya. He talked about the sectors that Shuruk looks at. And obviously, insurance is there, which is a good thing.
Yeah,
um, and they talked about what they look for in terms of investments, right?
yeah,
The ticket size of investment and the speed of the process
yeah,
itself. So, fairly
yeah.
approachable team, which is good news for our InsurTech founders.
Isn't it? Yeah. So that was quite refreshing to understand from Ahmed that they're quite approachable because typically when you see VCs or so far off or so rich or so inaccessible, that sort of things come through in our head, in our minds. And I think he felt that saying, no, we're quite approachable, we're very hands on. I love this whole approach of thesis sourcing. So the whole idea of studying an industry so well before they invest that they actually become your rightful advisors. And that's what many of the startups want. So that was super interesting for me.
Absolutely. So, it's going to be a power packed episode, and we hope you enjoy this.
In this episode, we're speaking with Ahmed Elgabri. He's the investment professional from Shorooq Partners. Ahmed, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you with us here.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
As
Awesome.
we were discussing earlier, you're the first VC professional to speak to us. So we're very thrilled to have you here.
Thank you for
Awesome.
having me. It's an honor to be the first.
Also, looking at your bio, you've had a very interesting career. Tell us, how did you land into working with a VC firm? And tell us a little
Mhm.
bit more about your role itself, please.
Sure. Yeah. Ever since I was probably in high school, I've been super interested in the whole like entrepreneurship space, venture capital, startups, and so on. So in order to break into VC, I always knew that there were two areas that I needed to solidify my experience in, which is on one side being an operator, so working for a startup, and then also having like financial services experience, because that's really where VC meets, right? Very luckily, when I was in college, I was very lucky to land a job at one of the highest growing or fastest scaling startups in Egypt in the ag tech space. And I worked very closely with the founders and the management team to really think of new ways to expand geographically, but also how to optimize existing business lines and launch new ones. So it was super interesting experience into this whole like universe, startups, especially in our region. And it's kind of a crazy world. And then when I graduated college, I knew that there was this second bucket that I really needed to solidify my experience in, which is the financial services, right? So I was very lucky to land a position at a publicly listed investment company in Egypt. It's one of the biggest in the country, but with most of its investments in industries like insurance, energy, and non-banking financial institutions. And I worked there on the business development and investment roles. So we really tried to think of new markets to tap into, new ways to adopt technology to allow our existing businesses to grow and so on. So I was there for about 2 years, and I think I had a good grasp of what that entailed of being a financial services professional. And that's when I started really going out there trying to fulfill my dream of becoming a venture capitalist. And that's when I was introduced to Tamer, Shane, and Mahmoud, who are the partners at Shurooq. And they offered me a position that I didn't think twice about taking. So for the past year and a half, I've been an investment professional with the firm based out of the Cairo, Egypt office. So essentially what I do is that I support the partners on various strategic initiatives, but my day to day involves me helping with things like sourcing of startup opportunities, conducting the due diligence, and also supporting with portfolio management and potentially exits down the road. So it's a very interesting profession, very exciting role to be at a VC in the region at
Mhm.
this stage. It's been like a very interesting year and a half, and I'm excited to see what the next many years have in store for us here at Shurooq.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is. These are exciting times indeed. You mentioned Brew Partners and how you
Mhm.
joined them and all that. Tell us a little bit more about the work that they do in the MENA region. What are the
Yes.
sectors that you're interested in? And more interestingly, for our listeners, is insurance there? You did mention slightly, but we'd like to know more about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Sure. So Shorooq, we are the leading early stage venture capital fund in MENA and Pakistan. So essentially we invest in startups from the pre-seed to the Series A in our core markets. And we're very lucky today to have 6 offices across 5 countries. So we have offices in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Riyadh, Cairo, Manama, and Pakistan. And the reason we're spread out like that is that we really believe in the value of adding the utmost value to our portfolio companies. So whether it's through things like fundraising or operations or business development, we really are quite hands-on. We really try to live up to our ethos of being founders partners, right? And luckily, because of how active we are, we want to lead every single transaction that we participate in. To date, we've invested in about 60 companies spread across 4 main verticals, which are software, platforms, fintech, and Web3 and tech-enabled business services.
Okay.
And what really sets us apart is really the strength of our backers. So we're very lucky to be backed by 8 of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds. These include 7 regional ones in addition to a global sovereign wealth fund, a number of large corporates, including Bupa, for example, and Kakao, and a number of large family offices and investment companies. We also have a few other very interesting initiatives that we're doing as Shorooq. So we also have launched the very first venture debt fund in the region, and we announced the launch of the second version of that very recently. And we also have the region's very first gaming accelerator that we'll be launching very shortly. So a lot of very exciting things going on here at Shorooq.
Very good. So just to follow up on how big is the firm and how do you manage the difference or the I wouldn't say tensions, but synergies between investing and helping the firms operate and succeed as startups?
So today we have across all our funds, we have over $250 million in assets under management.
Yeah.
So we're scaling quite rapidly. And the way we help our portfolio companies really scale. So as I mentioned, we try to be as active as possible and to add that utmost value, whether through giving them access to, so the whole reason we launched the venture debt fund is to give businesses that are Series B and beyond access to non-dilutive capital, right? Mm-hmm. To allow them really to scale without burdening the founders. So that's one way we're really trying to add a tangible amount of value to our portfolio company. In addition, we leverage our networks and our limited partners base to give our portfolio companies access to growth capital, whether local or global, to really allow these businesses to grow, or even introduction to like strategic investors and that kind of thing. And then finally, another way we really can add tangible values, as I mentioned, we have 6 offices across 5 countries. So we're the only regional VC with this kind of a footprint. So we can really allow, for example, a business in Jordan to expand to Egypt, or a business in, let's say, Saudi Arabia to expand to the UAE, and vice versa. So we really are creating these corridors, and we're really trying to champion this initiative in the region.
Got it.
Interesting. So when you see from the trend perspective, what are the key trends that you're seeing in the whole venture capital space that's emerging in the near future? And really focusing more towards on the Insurtech side of things, what is now the fresh outlook and observation that Shorooq Partners is seeing when it comes to Insurtech space? And you mentioned you're doing a lot of similar in other industries as well. How is that faring when it comes to other industries?
Definitely. So I think there are a few ways to look at this on the Insurtech side. So if we look at the different markets that we operate in, if we take, just for simplicity's sake, Egypt and the UAE. In Egypt, where you have very low insurance penetration rates, so insurance is still quite a nascent market here, despite the fact that we have large public players, but like the private sector is still fairly nascent. That has its own kind of opportunities. And then when you look at a market with higher insurance penetration rates like the UAE, that's a different kind of opportunity. So in Egypt, you're seeing a lot of platforms, a lot of trends coming out that are selling direct to consumer, like kind of online brokerages, that kind of a thing. You're seeing a lot of that because they're still trying to build that first layer of education, right?
Yeah.
But whereas if you move to a more developed market like the UAE, you're seeing a lot more advanced solutions. Like you're seeing startups develop software for claim management. You're seeing startups develop solutions to incentivize users to use their insurance and get cash back. So it's a lot more developed depending on the geography that you're in. And then if we go into actually like Insurtech globally, you'll see that there's a lot of more and more in emerging markets, you're seeing a lot of embedded insurance solutions. So you'll have like micro insurance for, let's say, smartphones, or micro insurance for like motorcycles or something. So I think that's another trend that's really exciting that hopefully we'll see more and more in our region, and because other regions like in Latin America and so on, this is actually a fairly developed thesis. So hopefully we'll be seeing more and more of that.
quick follow-up on this is that obviously we are talking about the winter in terms of funding and stuff like that globally. Do you see that happening in the region as well? And or is that restricted to certain stages? For example, pre-seed versus late stage, or any sectors, for example, fintech versus, let's say, agri-tech. I would love to know your thoughts on.
So I think more and more now, investors, when they're looking at companies, I still think there's an abundance of capital out there. You have a lot of funds who have raised quite a good amount of capital recently.
Yeah.
So startups are still able to raise, but there's more of an emphasis around sustainability of the business model. Capital has become more and more expensive.
Yeah.
Access to capital has become more and more expensive. So startups have to really be able to operate in a more sustainable and lean manner. So I think it's a wake-up call for a number of companies, but there is an abundance of capital and investors are still willing to invest in our regions. And optimistically, if you look at the GCC, for example, it's the area and globally that's probably faring the best when it comes to the global macroeconomic shock, right? So you're still seeing a considerable amount of growth in our regions. A lot of startups still coming up, large rounds being announced. So it still is a very exciting time. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. The problem we are, though, facing in the region is that at the early stage, there's an abundance of capital. But then when we get to the later stage, in the US, for example, the capital markets are very developed. So you have private equity, you have large corporates, you have IPO tracks, a number of things. In our region, we're still building this whole ecosystem. So we're very confident at Shorooq that surely this will happen. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think we have seen some of these overseas markets like NASDAQ, etc., setting up shop here. The depth of the capital markets will grow as you get more and more modern firms coming into the region. Yeah.
100%. Definitely.
Yep. Ranjit, you had a question?
No, so I think now diving into the nitty-gritties of this selection process of sort of startups. You must be seeing thousands of them. You pick one or two. So what are the important criteria that you use to evaluate these potential investments? And also, how do you decide on the industries and startups to focus on?
Definitely. If I can give you a high level framework about what we look at when assessing a potential investment is first and foremost, because we invest in the early stage, it's super important to invest in the team and the founders. We really believe it's super important to have founders that are close to the problem, that really understand it, and that who have spent years trying to solve this, right, before deciding to launch their business. And this is Andreessen Horowitz, they call it the idea maze, right? To really have this kind of thoughtfulness around the way you're solving the problem. Yeah. And once we have that conviction in the team and in the founders, then we try to identify, is this team solving a large and very complex problem, right? Mm-hmm. Because you need for the market to be quite sizable for you to be able to generate outsized return. And then if the company is already operating, how is this company performing? Are they showing early signs of product market fit? Are they showing good retention with their users? And we take a look at that as a very high level framework as to what we're looking for in an investment, especially at the early stage, right? And I believe your second part of the question is how do we decide on which industry the startups to focus on?
Yes.
Yeah. So we run this, we always try to be as thoughtful as possible, right? So we run this very interesting work stream called the thesis driven sourcing, right? Yeah. So essentially, there are a few ways to do this, right? So either we identify global trends that are happening in structurally similar markets or in more advanced markets, right? And we try to really dig deep and learn as much as possible about this space. So what are the different layers? Who are the different players? What is the regulation around this? Who backs this kind of a company? We ask ourselves all these questions. We write internal research reports to really go deep and understand the space. If we find this exciting, then what we do next is that we go out and we try to map the market, right? Who are the players operating in the region? We try to speak to them, understand the regulation, understand what's happening, what's limiting, what's not, and then how we can support these businesses, right? So that's really the way we do it, to try to be as thoughtful as possible through this thesis-driven sourcing. And then we also sometimes will ask ourselves the question, what is the large and growing market in the region? And what are the problems that are faced by this market? And then we try to work our way backwards to identify what are the more interesting companies solving this problem and how are they performing and how are they solving.
Got it.
That's really how we go about it.
That's very in depth. By the time a founder hits you with a startup idea, you actually almost are the semi-expert in that,
exactly.
segment, and you can ask the right questions and stuff like that.
Exactly. So that's the whole idea. Ideally, we get when the startup comes to us or when we go to them, we already know like quite a bit about the space, and this way we can actually play this role of active investors and lead the round and really support them because we understand the problem, we understand the space.
Yeah.
And that's why I was alluding to the point that it's important for the founders to be close to the problem because they also need to understand the space like way more than us.
Oh,
I think, yeah. So with this synergy, I think it's a very interesting, and you always create like an interesting dynamic.
no, sounds very good. So tell us then some recent investment that you would have made based on this whole thesis-driven sourcing study that you've undertaken, and why did you choose to invest in that startup, in that particular company?
I think a good example of us having a thesis and really following through with it is a company we invested in recently in Egypt called Khazzinli. So it's an on-demand digital warehousing and fulfillment platform. So the reason it's a great example of thesis-driven sourcing is that we identified a large and growing e-commerce, like in the e-commerce space. It's a huge space in the region. Everyone orders everything online. We know it's growing and it's large. But when we actually looked at the opportunities, we noticed that there was a recurring trend that in fulfillment, which essentially for us is the infrastructure layer, in comparison to advanced markets like the US, like Europe, and Asia, and all these advanced markets, our actually fulfillment capabilities are rather nascent, especially if you're a small e-commerce seller that's selling, let's say, I don't know, any like toy or something on Instagram, right? Given this fact, we went out and we decided to learn more about the fulfillment space and how technology can be leveraged to optimize these and help grow the e-commerce space, right? And by doing that, we went out to the market. We spoke to a number of players, but then when we were introduced to Yunus and the team at Khadinli, I think the chemistry was there from right off the start. We really believed in what they were doing, the way they were thinking. They're very mature founders with an extremely advanced solution. And we were very excited to back them. And alhamdulillah, in H2 of last year, we actually led their seed round. And we're very excited about what the business is building today.
Exciting. I think warehousing would be a problem across the region itself. It's generally such a complex problem. Yeah. Great.
Exactly. And by owning that like middle area, so warehousing, you're able really to add a tremendous amount of value to your startup, like to the businesses that you're working with. So you can start offering them additional solutions like financing, like insurance, like a lot of things that they wouldn't be able to access on their own. You're giving them this ability. So we're definitely super excited about this space, and everything will work out.
Perfect. Now, I think some of the parts of the question that's coming up, you've already answered. So I think you're leaning more towards the early stage seed area as much as possible. I'm sure there are follow-up investments if they're doing well. So if a startup approaches you, what is the sort of process they can expect from Shorooq Partners?
Sure. So our investment process is quite straightforward. So initially, the founder or the founders will get on a call with someone from the investment team, where we'll really get to know each other, understand the solution, understand where you're at. And then what this person from the investment team does is that we bring it to the wider investment team. And that's where we really discuss the business. And if we're excited, then we make a sprint or pass decision very quickly, within a week to 10 days. Okay. If we decide to sprint, then we ask the founders to share more information with us, basic stuff like their data room, their financial projections, product roadmap. We'll also loop in another member of the investment team, usually a partner, and we'll go through a product demo, get to know the business a bit more. If we're still excited with all the information we have, then we take it to what we call a deep dive session, right? In the deep dive session, it's a 2 to 3 hour long session where the entire Shorooq firm is there, where we discuss the opportunity, really go as deep as possible as we can into the investment. If we're all as well, then we take it to the IC. So it actually sounds like a lot of steps, but it's actually quite dynamic, and we can get all this done within a month to 6 weeks. Okay. We've been much quicker than that in the past, but that's our general KPI.
Got it. And what's the sort of ticket size you consider?
Mm-hmm. So we invest really depending on the stage, but per ticket anywhere from $1 to $3 million for early stage, and then we can go as much as $10 million if it's a later stage business. So that's on the ticket, and we have a very strong follow-on strategy. There are certain businesses that we've invested in 5 or 6 times. Once we've identified like a company that we want to support and that we really believe in, we really double down on that company and we back them quite aggressively.
Got it. And a follow-up on this is, what are the mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making when they come to you or looking for funds, and what are your tips to go through a successful fundraise?
Yeah, I think some of I wouldn't call them mistakes, but I think
learning
it's
opportunities.
Always important. Yeah, learning opportunities. But I always think, in my view, It's important to show intent, right? So if you want to build this out, go out, try to identify, I'm not saying hire the people, but identify the team, identify exactly what you're going to do. Like really have a clear like strategy, right? Because what we're essentially underwriting is that your ability to take the business from A to Z, right? So show us that you have an initial hypothesis at least. And let's like make steps and let's work from there to design like a go-to-market strategy and then to work from there. But at least have an initial view strategy. I think is important. And then we can challenge it or not. And we can work together to build this business. That's secondary.
Yep.
Right. Stepping back to the markets that I think Shorooq is spread across, you'll agree that regionally, especially when it comes to financial services, each country has its own uniqueness and base. It's a lot dictated by the regulatory environment that each country is in. Now, tell us some of the countries. Tell us how some of the countries are utilizing that pace to their advantage. UAE, of course, as you said, is quite advanced in many ways, but countries like Egypt, KSA, Qatar are making massive progresses, right?
So in terms of kind of the regulatory landscape, it's actually, I think everyone can agree that it's been quite refreshing to see how responsive and accepting the regulators and public sector have been actually to startups in the region. So like in the UAE and Saudi, the government's launching open banking licenses and really pushing the envelope when it comes to developing this sector in the region. For example, you also see them having like Web3 and blockchain strategies. So it really is refreshing to see the growth and the opportunities that will come out of there. And then in Egypt, for example, and Pakistan, the governments are also really trying to be a part of this whole entrepreneurship boom. So today, in Egypt, we now have our own instant payment network, which is, in other countries, it might seem like old news, but for us, this is going to be like a huge building block for many technologies to come. And it was all facilitated by the government. So we really are, in general, at Shorooq, super optimistic of how the governments have been able to adapt to changing environments. And we work with them very closely to allow for this kind of growth that is the benefit of everyone, really. So definitely very exciting on the regulatory side.
Great. Are you able to pick up some examples, perhaps, of some ecosystem players in each of those countries and how Shorooq is actually playing a part to build them up?
Yeah, definitely. If we think about Egypt, for example, you'll see that like we have, for example, a company called Kaish, which does reverse invoice factoring for startups. This is a very new trend that central banks could be hesitant to adopt, to allow for a third party to develop technology to facilitate these transactions. But what was really refreshing is that the government gave them the green light to proceed and to work with banks and to work with large anchors and suppliers. So we do see in general, like an overall eagerness or urge to work with these startups. And I think Kaish, one of our portfolio companies that we're very proud to have backed, is a great example of that.
Right. Now I'll probably dig a little deep into I was fascinated by that assisting and helping the startups grow part of it. So how deep is that level of operational involvement? Do you actually deploy people who in the ecosystem that those could be good for the startups? Obviously there's a board seat involved where you guide the strategy, but I'm guessing I'm asking, how deep do you go into the management teams to add value?
Yeah, definitely. So I think just to put this into context, it really depends on how deep the founder wants us to go also, because we're not there to tell the person how to run his business or how not to. We try to be as supportive and helpful as possible to enable these businesses to reach their utmost potential. So in the case of the example you gave of introducing to people in our networks and so on, this is something we do on a daily basis. We're constantly introducing our startups to potential candidates for different roles, to potential investors and so on. It really is a cooperation. We really do feel like we are part of the team. And we do spend a lot of time with our startups and their founders. Like they can come to our office anytime. We can meet up for coffee. They can call us at any hour. We always want to be like the first call when there's good news and bad news. That's always our goal. So the relationship does go very deep. But like this is a very interesting question that you asked, because a way we're trying to institutionalize this is actually to launch a dedicated team that will help these startups with things like recruiting, with things like technology development. So on the product side, to help them to just have a team inside Shorooq that's just dedicated, in addition to the work that we're already doing, to also add value to these startups and help them throughout their journey. And alhamdulillah, that's why we've been able in our most recent fund to read every single transaction that we participate in, because founders do recognize this value that we add and how much we enjoy spending time with them, and we want to spend the utmost time that we can with them.
So that's almost like a semi-venture builder kind of an approach, isn't it?
I see what you mean, but it's different because generally we want also the businesses to stand on like kind of their own feet, right? So we can't be ingrained in the day to day, but as much as possible, we try to support. And we have been with companies since the very, very early stage. Our founding partner, Mahmoud, was a co-founder of Pure Harvest, for example, which is a household name today. So we do have that element, but we are still a venture capital.
That's right. Vidya.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, and then just extension of that itself. How do you approach exit and the whole exit strategy in the region? When do you know the time is right? And also, as how do you stay informed and connected with all of those in the latest developments, generally in the startup ecosystem, to be able to make that decision as well?
Sure. So in terms of exits, I think we had alluded to this a while ago. Like in the US, you have very robust capital markets, right? So you have many exit avenues. So the way we look at it here in the region is that we want to be enablers for this to allow for our companies to have healthy exit routes. So whether it's things like, and we're very blessed to have large corporations and large family offices and governments in the GCC and in the region that are particularly becoming more and more interested in technology, and that would be eager to partner with a business at the later stage of its journey. And that could be an exit avenue for us. And we're seeing more and more IPOs. So Jahiz in Saudi Arabia IPO'd, Saudi and Egypt IPO'd many years ago. So we're seeing more and more of an IPO market for the kind of businesses that we are backing. So this is a super refreshing kind of development in the region, and that's how we're looking at it. And then obviously we have always our ear to the ground, and we have access to networks in the US, in Europe, of companies, large companies that could be interested in entering our markets by working with or partnering with one of our existing portfolio companies. So those are just a few regional and international ways that we can think about exits and exit strategies. I think the second part of your question, the way we stay informed and connected with latest developments, as I mentioned, the best way is just to have like great conversations with people like you guys, just to have a chat, understand like how other people are thinking. That's why we always try to surround ourselves with people that are extremely intelligent, extremely well informed. And through that, we're able to extract knowledge and that kind of thing. But also on a personal level, we do have the duty, as I mentioned, we do at TDS and different work streams constantly. We're constantly reading, constantly sharing stuff with each other, engaging with each other. And also on a personal level, like myself, I do like to read newsletters every day. I think there's some really good ones, both regional and international, that you can read about, like startups, who's being acquired by whom, who raised a large fund, and so on. So that's how I stay up to date personally.
Perfect. I just want to follow up on that newsletter piece because I'm always interested. Any good regional ones that you would recommend?
Yeah.
So in Egypt, for Egypt-based news, there's a really good one that a lot of business professionals in Egypt read every day. It's called I'd really actually recommend that. And it also gives you a glimpse on the region, but it gives you like all the news you need in Egypt, a very quick daily newsletter. It really is very good.
Perfect.
So definitely recommend that one.
The name actually in our comment section as well. So the viewers can check it out too. Yeah.
Sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. You've joined the industry not too far back. And what sort of advice would you give to somebody who's starting into the venture capital industry? And do you recommend that it's an interesting industry to join as a youngster?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you're constantly creating value, right? You're always allocating capital in the right places to the companies. Then you're really helping them grow and also hire and like a lot of amazing things by doing this job. So it really is a great job. I think the one piece of advice I would have is to always be optimistic. We are always constantly pushing the envelope of innovation. So it's very important to keep that eye and not become, let's say, pessimistic, just stay optimistic. And another thing is that this job is perfect for someone that's very curious, right? You speak to a lot of people, you speak to a lot of companies, you're exposed to so many different sectors. So just always remember to stay curious, stay interested, try to stay up to date as much as possible, learn about structurally similar markets. And if you do all these things right, I'm sure you'll enjoy the job more and more. And it is a great job to have.
Excellent.
Awesome. So my last question for you was, and I think you answered that, but essentially I wanted to know for an aspiring Insurtech based in the region, how can you reach out to Shorooq Partners? Is there an email ID or is there a specific place that they reach out to and what can they expect as a response. But I think the last part you did, but maybe you can refresh us with who they can reach out to.
Definitely 100%. So we actually have we're super approachable as a firm. As simply put, you can reach out to us at shorooq.com. We have a get funded application where the startups can go on, they can apply, and we review every single application on the form and we provide feedback to every single founder.
Okay.
In general, we really are super approachable, and the easiest channel to do that is just through our website. We always get back in a timely fashion, and we always are excited to speak to passionate entrepreneurs and see how we can support them. So that, I would say, is the easiest way to reach out to us.
Excellent. So you can expect a few applications coming your way then.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be our pleasure.
Perfect. And as we've come towards the end of the episode, and we have totally enjoyed this, anything that we have missed asking that you would like to cover, feel free to.
No, I think we've covered everything. It really was a pleasure, and it's great to see what you guys are building in the Insurtech space in the region. It's important to build this ecosystem. In general, I want to pick your brains. What is something that you guys think is an interesting space within Insurtech in our region for someone like us to look out for? As I mentioned, we're always looking for new and exciting trends, but would love to pick your brains as the expert as well.
Hardly the experts, but Vidya, you want to give a shot? It's the first time we are being interviewed.
I swear. It's great. Thank you so much for putting us on the spot.
Yeah.
But I think personally, I would say embedded insurance. And
Sure.
I think I'd like to go for lifestyle and micro insurance. You mentioned that as well. Super exciting to be. We've not been particularly creative on that front in this region. So therefore, lifestyle, huge opportunity. So I think those would be my bet.
100%.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's the sort of the allied part to open banking. It's open insurance, right? There's so much data that is hidden away in so many companies, and which you can to make these embedded products, these micro insurance products. So I think those enablers, we have lean in the case of banking, those kind of players will come in insurance as well, which will help you quickly get their data out to distribution partners, to customers, so on and so forth. I think I'm excited about open insurance personally.
100%. No, I appreciate that. Thank you guys for that.
Perfect.
Great. Awesome. So that was a fascinating interview. I think our audience is going to love it because it's got like lots of new insights that we've not, as we mentioned in this series at all. So thank you so much for sharing the news with us.
Thank you so much, guys, for your time today.
Hi, it's me, Ranjit. If you enjoyed this episode, I request you to leave us a review. This will help us to reach more great podcast listeners like you. Thank you.